Katrina Pierson, Trump campaign national spokesperson, and Richard Fowler, national syndicated radio host, join us now to talk about this. Katrina, it's interesting. He says he is not going to pivot, and yet we are seeing some indications of pivots in terms of the Muslim ban, in terms of the NATO stance that he took. He has pivoted. So which is it?
Well, Martha, I would just say he said from the very beginning that he can be presidential when he wanted to be. Mr. Trump has had the same stance he's always had. He wants to be himself. He doesn't want to be dishonest to the voters. And you'll see at the rallies he continues to be himself, having a lot of fun with a lot of his supporters, tens of thousands at a time. And then you'll see him be presidential when he's given prepared remarks, like the ones we're going to see tonight. And so I think what we're seeing is Donald Trump. You're seeing Donald Trump, the candidate, as well as Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief. He's had to break through a dramatic primary process, and now he's had to fight, specifically with the media, which is usually what happens post-convention. The Democrats combine with the media and try to really take out the Republican, which has been successful in the past.
But that's happened to many Republican presidential candidates in the past, Katrina, and they handled it, some would argue, differently than Donald Trump is handling it. I mean, that's nothing new.
That's my point, Martha, and they lost. And they lost. We have a Republican candidate now who's going to fight back, and he's withered those storms for the last couple of months. And now you're going to see Donald Trump counterpunch being presidential.
All right. I mean, Reagan and both Bushes also put up with what many would say was a press corps that was not that favorable to them
like this.
In those years.
Not
so,
like this.
Richard, let me get you in here. What do you think about all that?
Well, I got to tell you, Martha, I have a problem with this whole idea of like today I'm going to be presidential and tomorrow I will not be presidential. If Donald Trump becomes a president of the United States, he has to be presidential. And this lead up, this campaign shows you whether or not somebody can be presidential. And what the tea leaves are telling us here and what all the evidence says is that Donald Trump is incapable of being presidential because he'll give a televised remark tonight, which will probably be very good. I credit the campaign with the statement they released about bigotry earlier today. Right. But then tomorrow, he'll say something that's bigoted, and you go right back to square one again. What this campaign's really got to do is listen to what the people on the right are telling them. The Wall Street Journal released an editorial talking about how Donald Trump needs to stay on message. Donald Trump needs to find a message that works for the American people.
I mean, that same
Maybe
editorial
he should
was
listen
pretty
to the right
about the foreign policy speech that he gave the other day. And you mentioned this pledge, which I can read to the folks that he was released on Facebook. He said, "This is my pledge to the American people. As your president, I will be your greatest champion. I will fight to ensure that every American is treated equally, protected equally, and honored equally. We will reject bigotry and hatred and oppression in all its forms and seek a new future built on our common culture and values as one American people." Is that something that we're going to hear more? Well, go ahead, Richard.
That's a great statement, Martha. That's a great statement.
I
agree with it wholeheartedly. But sadly, what you see is what you've seen from this candidate and his actions are the opposite of the statement, right? When you go out and you say, I don't like this judge because he happens to be Mexican, even though the judge was born in Indiana, that is the opposite of, instilling bigotry and ending oppression. That is adding on to oppression. What we see happening today when he chose not to meet with the African-American community in Milwaukee is another example of adding on to oppression. You can't talk about policing in communities without talking about poverty and how you fix it and creating jobs and creating opportunity for the African-American community.
Is the main focus of tonight's speech. So that's the part that we're told that's going to be bold and different and interesting, Katrina. But, address Richard's issue here with the statement and what he says are contradictory behaviors.
Well, first of all, Obama dropped it like it was hot. I'm not quite sure how presidential that was. But Mr. Trump has met with several African-American groups and black pastors and had these discussions, and many of them have been on this program before. And many of them have been on this program before. When Mr. Trump talks about someone like the judge who he felt like was biased, it wasn't specifically because he didn't like a certain group of people. He was talking about the bias that does exist in the criminal justice system, which we could also talk about. Specifically, Donald Trump wants to be the candidate, wants to be the leader that for once represents everyone equally, that doesn't put people in their little corners and label them and represent them.
I just want to bring, Sheriff David Clark, who is one of the people that he met with today in Milwaukee, and who has been on this program and who spoke on behalf of Donald Trump at the convention, speaks very powerfully to the basis of what we're expecting to hear tonight. tonight, Richard, which is that liberalism and liberal governments in places like Milwaukee have done a disservice to African Americans, and that he believes, and Sheriff Clark believes, that waking people up to that reality is what needs to happen.
I mean, I disagree with the sheriff wholeheartedly, but before I talk about that, Martha, I'm sorry, but Katrina, I think you are suffering from amnesia. Donald Trump very clearly in the Jake Tapper interview a couple months back said the reason why I have a problem with this judge is because I'm trying to build a wall and he's Mexican, quote, right? That is the opposite of I have a problem with his practices. That's the absolute opposite.
That doesn't translate. When you talk about an isolated incident, that doesn't translate into full-blown racism. He is talking about what happens when you end up with an activist judge, which was proven. So you cannot ignore that.
How was this judge activist?
Hold on,
the Trump campaign.
Richard, hold
Katrina,
on.
you have yet to prove
we've gone over the territory of the
before.
judge comment many times, but you are deflecting what I think is the significant issue tonight. And that is, and I talked to Sheriff Clark about this yesterday, they are going to argue that liberalism has ravaged the African-American community and other minorities in places like Milwaukee, and that is at the heart of the problem, and that is what needs to change. Do you agree with that?
No, I fundamentally disagree with that. What we saw when America's middle class was the best, right, when African Americans were thriving, was in the late 70s and the early 80s, right, when you had more union households, you had more policies that worked on. Well, when LBJ got ready to leave office in the war on poverty, we had eliminated childhood hunger.
That's not true when you look at the numbers over the long haul from the 1960s till now. They haven't moved that much at all, Richard.
What we had in the 70s.
So what's improved?
What we had in the 70s was the implementation of a federally controlled public education system, which has failed the black community. We have out-of-control immigration because we have illegal aliens moving into the black community, and Bill Clinton's mass incarceration in the crime bill.
But
you know what, Richard, this is the debate that we need to be having when it comes to this issue of our inner cities, okay?
I hear that. I'm willing to debate the facts, but Katrina just makes things up.
Look, guys,
illegal immigration, education, mass incarceration, those are very serious issues.
We're going to leave it there because I'm out of time, but I thank you.